You've taken a lot of wonderful pictures over the years, and we selected a few here that we'd like to get some comments about. One of the first pictures I like to talk about is the crossing the Edmund Pettus Bridge on the 50th anniversary of the Bloody Sunday March to Selma.
It was a very historic day. It was the 50th anniversary of that Bloody Sunday March, and I remember that walking out in front of the president and the other dignitaries, trying to get a low enough angle and waiting until you could see the name of the bridge, because to me that was the one factor that I was trying to capture. This obviously was open to the press, and there's lots of pictures from this march, and including some really good ones by the wire service photographers that were on a flatbed truck out in front. But for me, having the ability to move about more than anybody else, I was just trying to frame it so you could see the name of the bridge in the frame.
Yeah, I thought it was great that you had both presidents in it, because I know some people photographed it a lot tighter because of Bush being in the shadow.
Yeah.
And when I thought you really did include what was really significantly historic at that event.
Yeah, and just to, it was unfortunate that Bush was in the shadow. I think there was some unfair criticisms of some of the photographs that didn't include Bush. But, when you're shooting with a telephoto lens, sometimes you have to crop out certain things. And I don't think there was any ill intent on a part of the wire service photographers. I think it just like the some of the best pictures just happened not to include President Bush.
Okay, the next picture is the waiting in the Blue Room before a press conference.
Yeah, so this was actually it was actually a significant period of time. This was in November of 2010, and it was either a day or two after the midterm elections, in which the Democrats got shellacked, basically. And one thing I've always admired about President Obama is even when, bad stuff happens, he goes out and faces the music, which, you have to do if you want to be a leader. And so he was waiting for his cue to be announced at this press conference in the East Room. This is in the Blue Room. And I just thought it was almost a symbolic mood for what he must be going through. The fact that, the Republicans had now taken control of Congress, and he knew this was going to make his life very difficult. And so when I look at this picture now, that's what I think of.
Well, when you were in the room with him and you saw him framed in the curtains, creatively, this is such a dynamic photograph. There is a silhouette effect to it, but you still have detail in the shadows. Was that something you considered as you were framing the photograph?
Yeah, things happen really fast, and you kind of have to move quickly and compose quickly, and it's not as if this moment is there for 5 minutes. It's there for sometimes only seconds, and so it's just this learning how to frame and react and consider all the technical aspects of the situation in front of you really quickly. And I probably made very few frames because again, this scene didn't last very long. But just trying to position myself in the right place, using the right exposure to have that silhouette effect, but yet still maintain, as you say, detail in those paintings. It's just kind of reacting as quickly as one can.
Well, looking at the detail, there is a tissue over the cup in the glass in the photograph. And was that typical of having something on top of? I assume it was a drink for him before he went into the press conference.
Oh, you know what that is. That's really interesting observation. So it's a like a cover.
Just covered up. It's
Right.
pure.
So
there's nothing
you
of the
know
drink
that
in it.
no one has taken a drink from this glass of water. It's
Okay.
interesting that you noticed that because I did not notice that.
Doing the wave with Raul Castro in Cuba, Obama mixed his family with diplomacy in a way that looked very easy. And you have a picture here of the wave with Castro. And how'd the wave start?
We were at a baseball game in Havana between the Tampa Bay Rays and the Cuban national team. And people in the crowd started doing the wave. And the girls, Sasha Malia, started joining in right away. And then I think after it went around a couple times, the president joined in, and then Castro. You can sort of see the girls have already and Michelle have already they're done with it. And this is like probably the third or fourth time around the stadium, and then the president and Castro joined in. My only, I tend to be the biggest critic of my own work, and the one thing that's, and you can't control this, but this is the way it happened, is you can't see Castro's face that well. And I have another picture where there's President Obama standing cheering after the Tampa Bay team had scored a run, and you see Castro's face much clearer, and it's sort of like, this is a great moment because they're doing the wave, but the other one you get to see both faces better. It's choices, which picture is the better one. So I don't know.
With the family at Christ Redeemer in Rio de Janeiro, and that's again with Obama with his family. What I found interesting is, and this photograph is a pure silhouette photograph. It looks almost foggy at that scene, and the decision to position yourself where you did. And I know when I was a photographer, there were times where I would say a little thank you, God, when pictures formed and everybody got in the right places. What was your experience like at that scene?
Yeah, this is an interesting night. So we had been scheduled to take the motorcade up from Rio up to Christ the Redeemer statue, and they canceled it because the weather was so bad that you couldn't see anything, and B, they thought it'd be too not the safest thing is to take the motorcade up when there's no visibility at all. So the family had dinner, and by then it was by the time they finished dinner, it was quite late, and they had gotten word that the fog had lifted and it was safe to drive up there. And when you're on these foreign trips, you have really long days, you're jet lagged. So the overall sentiment from the family was, well, it's too late, let's just go to bed. And then somebody finally chimed in that this might be the only chance we ever get to see Christ the Redeemer. We should just buck up and go. So they went, and we got up there, and it was clear, but like within 10 or 15 minutes, the fog started rolling back in, and it just created this majestic scene. And I probably overuse in the photographs that you've chosen here. I've probably overused silhouette as a compositional element, but the one thing about President Obama, he has a very distinctive look from behind. So I think you can tell it's him, and then that's Mrs. Obama on the right, and that's actually Valerie Jarrett on the left, and then one of the girls in the background. And it just kind of came together. It's funny. There's the next frame after this one, it just completely falls apart. So I had literally one frame, again, where I'm kind of jockeying to try to line it up as it's happening. I mean, it's not a set-up picture. They're actually walking upstairs, and it just trying to get it just right. And it just, that was a magical scene, that when that fog started rolling in like that.
It really is. It's a beautiful photograph. Editing remarks with speechwriter John Favreau. This picture has so much detail in it, and I've heard from writers that have gone through the gallery and looked at this photograph, and I can see them standing forever looking and reading and looking at all that detail and absolutely loving this photograph. What drew you to this photograph?
I think it shows a lot about him without actually showing him. It tells you a lot about his process of writing, his process of editing. The two things to tell you about this picture is, when I first made this picture and we were going to make it public on our Flickr site like a month or two later, we had to have a researcher look at everything to make sure there was, he hadn't written any curse words, or that there was an element of his handwriting that turned out to be completely different than what the final speech was. So they were just very careful to. But then we got the sign off, and I think it gave people the insights that I talk about. The last 3 weeks of the administration, we hang these large photographs on the walls of the West Wing, and we rotate them out. And during the last 3 weeks, I came up with this idea of, basically putting up, my favorite photos from the 8 years, and this was one of them. And at one point, the president was walking through the West Wing to look at the photos, and he stopped in front of this photo for probably 10 minutes, which I found really fascinating, that he was reliving the speech and how he edited it by looking at this photograph. Again, I just think it tells you a lot about him, the way he works, the way he writes, the way he thinks, the way he edits, and it tells you a lot about the his seriousness to what he says means a lot.
Did you get much feedback from him about your photographs that were on display? Would he say he liked them, didn't like them? Would he tell you if he didn't like them, or if he liked them?
Yeah. He would almost always stop in front of a picture that included Sasha or Malia and say, "That's my favorite picture ever." And then, 3 weeks, he'd say the same thing about another picture that included Sasha and Malia. He did like we'll talk about the Spider-Man picture.
Yeah.
He always enjoyed that one. And it's such a unique moment, and the fact that he's reflected in the mirror, and again, it's like it happened so fast, and I have one frame, and then it was over. And he thought it was a fun picture, so he always made reference to that picture if somebody were to ask him, what are some of your favorite pictures?
Well, I think even looking at this photograph, you can just see all the creativity in it with the reflection in the mirror. I mean, and the American flag in the doorway.
Yeah.
All these different items, even though it's something that's so spontaneous, that you were so prepared for those moments, and that you had to be that. How did you constantly stay prepared for such moments, I guess? Did you have a plan?
Yeah, I mean, that was, I think that was the challenge, and that when you're working at the White House, a lot of the the stuff that happens every day is pretty mundane and tedious, and a lot of the I photograph hundreds and hundreds of meetings, and most of the time not much happens in terms of photographically. But it sort of, with him, it kind of kept me on my toes, that you just never knew if some little thing was going to happen, and you just needed to be ready for it. I mean, I think that's the advantage of me have had a background as a news photographer, is you sort of have that mentality ingrained in you, even when not much is going on. You just never know when something's going to happen, and then you have to be ready for it, because once the moment's gone, and you can't relive it.
I think the picture of him putting his foot on the scale reminds me of that. It looks like it was we're kind of waiting around for something to happen, and then something funny did happen. And I think that's what we see in a lot of the photographs that you shot during the Obama administration, was the humor and the fun of behind the scenes.
Yeah, I mean, this particular photograph, we were actually walking through. The funny thing about being president is you always walk through like kitchens and the worst part of whatever facility you're in. For security reasons, you're always going the back way, and we were walking through some locker room at I think it was the University of Texas. And Marvin Nicholson, who is a trip director, saw the scale and jumped on the scale just to check his weight. And, unbeknownst to him, the president had, put his toe on the scale. So Marvin kept sliding the scale further and further, thinking, oh, my God, I'm gaining weight. And you can tell everybody else is in on the joke except for Marvin. Marvin has no idea what's going on. He's like, trying to slide the scale. Meanwhile, the president keeps pushing his toe harder and harder on the scale. And, this one I actually was able to make a couple frames where I kept backing up to include both of the mirrors. Because, I think if you looked at my first frame, I don't have both of the mirrors in the frame, and I just kept backing up to try to improve the composition. So this one is probably like 5 frames that I was able to make before Marvin realized what the heck was going on.
Well, more seriously, the picture of Obama and Putin, you saw a lot of history in 8 years, and I'm sure you heard a lot of conversations that you can never repeat. They appear to be in a tight space, but they're surrounded by a lot of people, so I find it interesting, your conscious decision to make it a vertical picture. And was that to emphasize Obama's height over Putin by any chance?
That's an interesting question. This was this was actually on D-Day, anniversary of D-Day in Normandy. We were in Normandy. And they had this leaders' lunch. And one of the things that I became somewhat good at was being stealth, in that, there's all these world leaders at this luncheon, all of whom have official photographers, and all of whom were told you can't be in the lunch, including me. But somehow I've been able to, figure out how to maintain a low profile until something interesting is happening, and then you start taking pictures. So that's kind of what happened here, in that kind of snuck into this luncheon. And when the lunch broke up, this was at a tense time between the U.S. and Russia. And I suspected that President Obama would try to pull Putin aside and have a heart-to-heart conversation with him. And that's what had happened here. I probably started out shooting this as a tighter horizontal. But I kept, backing up and using a wider lens. And the way the body language was taking place, it just instinctively I felt the vertical was working better compositionally. I'm not consciously thinking, oh, I want to show that Obama is taller than Putin, I'm just trying to accurately portray what I'm seeing into a 35 millimeter frame. And there's lots of things going through my head. It's hard to explain it other than this just seemed like it was meant for a vertical picture. And so that's kind of how that came about.
The one of my favorite pictures is dancing with the First Lady at the governor's ball. And I think it was taken pretty early in the administration. It looks like it's in the East Room, but, them really surrounded by people, but the moment is there. Is he singing to her, and is she reacting to that?
Yeah.
Do you recall?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, so this was at the governor's ball. It was a black tie formal affair at the White House. All the governors from all 50 states and their spouses had been invited, and then in addition, some of the senior staff. And where I'm standing is just in front of the stage in the East Room, and directly behind me was the band Earth, Wind, and Fire.
Wow.
And so they started playing this slow song, and he started singing along. And the other thing that this picture brings back in terms of my memory is this was at a time when I was afraid to use too high of an ISO, and so I think I probably shot this at 1600, which was for me that you cannot use an ISO that high, and so this was taken wide open, at 1.4 aperture, and probably may have been even a 60th or an 80th of a second, because there was hardly any light in the room. So I remember struggling to, at 1.4, your focus is got to be right on, because if it's not, you're not going to have a usable picture. But I can still hear him singing along to the band.
The two most famous sets of ears in Washington. I mean, this is just funny. And you had to have covered at least 8 Easter egg rolls. And how did this happen, that they were on the Truman balcony, I take it?
Yeah, they're on it's not the Truman balcony, it's the Blue Room balcony,
okay.
Which is the one just below the Truman balcony. And yeah, I mean, I had covered this every year, but they sort of, the Easter Bunny, someone always dresses up as the Easter Bunny. And I think this was during the national anthem or something like that. But it never quite lined up like this. And then I kind of saw this. This was taken with a telephoto lens from inside the Blue Room, looking out through the door. And it never quite lined up like this. So I made this picture. We hung it in the West Wing. And I think a week or so after we hung it in the West Wing, the president was walking by and he saw it and he just started cracking up. And he's the one who came up with the 2 most famous sets of ears in Washington. That's actually a quote from him.
That's priceless.
And he said to me, "Can you make me a print of that so I can show the girls?" Because he thought it was the funniest thing,
It is funny. It's you just
Yeah.
stand there and you just stand and look at it and chuckle.
Yeah.
Well, when you go on your book tour, will you make Athens, Ohio one of your stops?
Yeah, I should do that, right?
We'd love it.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Is there anything else you want to say before we say we're done?
It was a great honor and privilege to be the chief White House photographer for President Obama. I tried to do the best job that I could in terms of showing what he was like as a president and as a human being, as a person. And I think hopefully when people look at my pictures for generations to come, they'll be able to understand and learn and see what he was like as a president, as a person, and what the inner workings of the White House were, by looking through my photographs.